In response to the inquiry at the top of the meeting about the word adjacent, we do have an alternative language.
Madeline,
The
you
way
got my
that
comments?
sheet works, Mr. Meyer, as you can tell, is that if you're going to move to suspend and move these amendments tonight, we would still need the first part of the motion from the staff report, which is regarding the occupancy permit. That's on page 4 and 5 of the staff report, which is also 4 and 5 in the iPad. So we still need that portion as well. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I will move that the Board of Supervisors suspend the rules.
Motion's been made for suspension of the rules. I will give that motion to second to Supervisor Buffington. Discussion on that motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion will pass. It's 280. Thank you. Mr. Meyer? 801, yeah.
Madam Chair, I move that the Board of Supervisors approve and adopt amended language to the codified ordinances of Loudoun County, section 684.03D. The discharge of firearms is prohibited within 100 yards of a building with a current occupancy permit and/or regularly occupied structure unless the owner or authorized agent has given permission, as provided in the attachment 1 December 11, 2019 Board of Supervisors Public Hearing Staff Report. I further move that the Board of Supervisors approve and adopt new language creating new section 684.03E in the codified ordinances of Loudoun County stating, the discharge of firearms for recreational or target shooting purposes shall be conducted in such a manner as to ensure that projectiles do not leave the boundaries of the property or parcel upon which the shooting is occurring, unless permission to do so has been granted by the owner of the property or parcel upon which the projectile lands. A projectile leaving the boundaries of the property or parcel shall be prima facie evidence of a violation of this section.
Motion's made by Supervisor Meyer, seconded by Supervisor Umstattd. Discussion on the motion, Mr. Meyer.
So first of all, I want to thank Supervisor Buffington. He launched, I think, the work group and study that started this, but obviously keeping it going is something that Supervisor Turnout I've had to work closely on as well as the full board. So I appreciate him letting me make the motion. Partially, we had a little bit of a conflict during the public hearing. I haven't seen his language yet, but the more research I did on his language, the more I actually was swayed to his opinion, because I actually think that requiring for folks to shoot in such a manner as to keep projectiles on the property is actually broader language, but still gets to the point of you have to contain your round on your property, which is the entire intent, whether that's whatever type of shooting you're doing. And so I actually think that language is the most enforceable because it is broader and gives our law enforcement the best chance of charging them and our prosecutors of actually convicting these people. And to be clear, no one has been successfully convicted yet in our board term of 20 instances where this has happened. People have been charged, no one has been convicted. There is a difference. And so that's exactly why we're here. We've had 20 instances of where target shooting has resulted in people's property or persons being hit. And that's what this board has set out to try to help stop or prevent or at least punish. Because right now, the opinion of our legal community is essentially that reckless discharge is borderline impossible to prove in court. And for two reasons. One, because of the reckless designation. You have to prove recklessness, not just that someone shot someone else's property. You have to prove they're being reckless. And that is legally a very high standard of proof. This one drops that reckless language. And so you have a lower burden of proof. Secondly, this also has to do with the manner of which the shooting is occurring, not just the fact that you don't have to specifically necessarily prove that an individual person shot an individual bullet. The manner and the context is important too. And so if people are target shooting in such a manner that is clearly going to have rounds leave the property, that is now prosecutable. And so that's why I support this language. I appreciate the full board seeing this out after 18 months. There were proposals that would have prohibited discharge within 880 yards of a house, which obviously would have essentially prohibited shooting and hunting in Western Loudoun. Those proposals didn't go forward. Instead, we launched a pretty thorough process into looking at what is the best way to try to solve the problems that we're having, trying to be more of a scalpel versus a bludgeon. And in the process of exploring a lot of things, obviously a lot of us have taken a lot of heat. But I think at the end of the day, this proposal isn't a panacea. It's not, pardon the pun, a silver bullet, but it is a step forward in giving our law enforcement and prosecutors a chance of punishing bad actors.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Mr. Letourneau?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be voting in favor of the proposal this evening. We heard a number of arguments, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I think we proved the First Amendment's alive and well in this country, and that's a darn good thing. We heard that this issue is not a problem. Well, even as the board was discussing this issue, the number of incidents continued to happen. Some of the public obviously wasn't aware of all those incidents because they didn't make the news, because only certain ones did. But we're over dozens at this point. And if you go back in time, it started piling up. Another argument was there's already laws on the books that address this, except not one person has actually been convicted of any of those individual incidents. There have been individuals that have been convicted of reckless discharge, but of these specific incidents that we've been looking at, which have been target shooting incidents, it's been impossible to prove that. And I have to just take a moment on that. Our Commonwealth Attorney is not incompetent. Our Sheriff's Office is not competent. I've heard throughout this debate that we somehow have a problem with our law enforcement who, for some reason, aren't doing their jobs because they're not prosecuting these individuals. At a certain point, the problem is not with law enforcement, it's not with Commonwealth Attorney, it's the fact that the law itself isn't getting at the problem. And that's why we're having this discussion. I also heard that responsible gun owners already follow these rules. There's 4 rules of safety. And that's true. And that's why this ordinance tonight is not a threat to anybody who does. Because it's only a threat if the bullet leaves the property in which it was shot without the permission of the person for whom it's receiving or the adjacent property owner. That's the only person in here who should be concerned about this language. Somebody who does that. Otherwise, for everybody out there, which I believe is the vast majority of people, who wouldn't put themselves in that position in the first place, this isn't a problem. We're getting at the bad actors here. We're getting at the folks for whom, for whatever reason, haven't taken this seriously. And it's happened enough times now. And yes, I understand we had a lot of people turn out tonight, but over the course of several years now, the board has heard from lots and lots and lots of citizens who are concerned about this and want us to try to stop it. And that's a reasonable thing to do. Now, I understand there's a lot of other issues out there. There's a lot of concerns about what's happening in Richmond and the General Assembly. That's not what's on our agenda tonight. The reality is, what's on our agenda is a very narrowly crafted solution that may not solve the entire problem, but it's certainly not going to hurt. If nothing else, it's going to be a deterrent out there to a problem that we have in our county, that we as the Board of Supervisors are trying to address because the General Assembly, even under Republican control, has specifically given us the ability and the authority in the statute to address and pass an ordinance such as this one. And that's why we're doing it.
Thank you, Ms. Letourneau. Ms. Hunter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the members of Moms Demand Action who are here, and I also want to thank those who are here in their mind supporting the Second Amendment. This does not violate any part of the Second Amendment. And I think every gun owner in this county, and especially those who are here tonight, is most likely a very responsible gun owner and would never purposely or hopefully even inadvertently shoot across someone else's land. Because as much as the gun owners here believe in their own property rights, I know you also respect the property rights of your neighbors. And it's a violation of the property rights of any of us to have reckless shooters shooting into our homes, wounding our family members, as happened with one lady, or even shooting around a tree stand of a neighbor who was on his property, and peppering the branches with shot. These are things that I don't think any of you would advocate doing any of that. But we have to acknowledge that while protecting your property rights, we also need to protect the property rights of those who live around you or others who shoot. And all this does is protect everybody's property rights, yours as well as everybody else's. It does not limit your ability to use the gun. All of you already do it responsibly, I'm quite sure of that. But it limits the ability of reckless shooters to violate other people's property rights, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, Ms. Umstead. Mr. Sains.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item before the board is because we've had several incidents where stray bullets have hit homes, wounded a person. Government has an obligation to keep the public safe. These incidences have not yielded a successful prosecution, which has brought this action forward. I took an oath, like every other board member here, to uphold the United States Constitution and the Virginia Constitution. I support the Second Amendment, just like I support every other part of the Constitution. However, rights come with responsibilities. The First Amendment does not mean you falsely yell fire in the theater. As even Justice Scalia said, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. What we are voting on tonight is a simple, limited measure that is necessary to ensure public safety. Imagine if you're in your backyard having a family barbecue or a baby shower, and your house is hit by a stray bullet because of the recklessness and negligence of another person. That would be unacceptable to you, and it should be. Where we can prevent tragedy, we should, and therefore that's why I'm voting yes on this measure tonight. Thank you, and thank you all for coming out to speak and using your First Amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Buffington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I first want to thank all of the speakers who came out this evening. Much appreciated, and we are happy to hear from you all. One thing, I just want to have a couple of comments based on what I heard from, in general, from the speakers. The first thing is that it was alleged that we're creating a new law that says you can't shoot within 100 yards of an occupied dwelling. That's an existing law on the books. We're making a minor change to that to make sure that the county, if someone actually shoots and violates that law, the county doesn't have to produce a occupancy permit in court. Because some of these buildings, like my house, was built in the 1930s. There's an addition in the 1970s. There's probably a permit for the 70s. I doubt there's a permit for the 30s part. And there's homes that were built before America was America in 1770. I mean, I know people whose homes have been here in Loudoun County long before America was America. And obviously, there's not going to be occupancy permits for that. Other things that were said, that we are voting away private property rights. We are absolutely not voting away private property rights. We're saying, shoot on your property, but don't infringe on your neighbor's right to not have your bullets fly through his property or her property. It was said that we are infringing on the rights to hunting and shooting on private property. Number one, hunting is not involved in this. This has nothing to do with hunting. That's a separate issue. This is about recreational and target shooting. So we are not infringing on the right of hunting. And again, we are not infringing on anybody's right to shoot on private property. Encourage it. Shoot on private property, but keep your bullet on your private property unless you have permission for that bullet to go onto your neighbor's property. That's all this is. And as many of you stated when you spoke to us, you absolutely agree with that. And if you follow the 4 weapon safety rules or gun safety rules, whatever you want to call them, then you'll never violate this. I don't think any reasonable, I'm just repeating what I said earlier, no reasonable and responsible gun owner should have a problem with this. We are not infringing upon Second Amendment rights. What we're doing is responding to situations that have occurred since this board took office in January 1st of 2016. Over 20 times this has occurred that we know of. I'm sure it's occurred a lot more that we don't know of, because unless someone knows that something happened, then we don't know what happened while we weren't at home or they weren't at home or whatever. 20 instances. Yes, people have been charged with reckless discharge, but no, none of them have been convicted. This creates a lower standard, and the current Commonwealth attorney, based on the email I got from Leo Rogers, who is the county attorney today, said that this will make it easier to prosecute these offenses in Loudoun County. That's all we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Buffington. Mr. Bonin?
Yes, thank you. Let me thank everybody for coming out. I really appreciate everybody being here. And I'm with you, okay? I appreciate that. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I understand where the frustrations are coming from, but make sure you aim them in the right place. You, like I, should be terrified at some of the pre-filing of bills that has happened in Richmond. And if you go look at some of those bills, especially a certain Senate bill, they're beyond belief, okay? Beyond belief. I mean, everybody in this room, myself included, would be a felon the minute it passes, okay? And that's, to me, that's just illegal confiscation, potential illegal search and seizure. It violates another amendment of the Constitution, okay? The Bill of Rights is there for a reason. And to try to hide behind some of these bills being proposed, I mean, having a clip with more than 10 rounds makes you a felon for your Glock? Come on. And that's what these do. So if you want to speak and exercise your First Amendment, you need to be doing that to our folks in Richmond, because that's important. These are the consequences you get when one political party has everything. There's no checks and balances anymore. And the extremes of the party then begin to control. And that's what's about to happen in Richmond. Now, to come back to what's happening here, I'm not going to support this. One thing that wasn't said is it does change the distance in the ordinance from 50 feet to 100 feet, okay? That was never said, but if you heard the first part of the motion, it is in there. It's right there in the packet. The second part of it is, this doesn't solve the problem. And why I have huge respect for Supervisor Buffington, he's a Capitol Police officer. He carries a weapon every day at work, okay? I have a tremendous amount of respect. He didn't tell you that, he didn't finish the sentence from the county attorney we got today. It did say that there could be a presumption created when the bullet leaves the property that could make it easier to enforce. What he didn't say, though, is that in any event, the Commonwealth can only prosecute the person who discharged the weapon. I'm reading the rest of the email he read part of. Determining that person's identity is still a law enforcement issue. This doesn't solve that. That's the reason I can't support that. It doesn't solve it. You still have the same problem that we have right now if this passes. Because if 5 of you are out there blinking and, one round goes off, how do they know which one of you is firing? They don't. We have that problem right now. That's why we haven't prosecuted. The ones we have prosecuted, most reckless discharge prosecutions come because somebody was cleaning their gun while it was loaded and they shot themselves in the leg or something. That does happen. It happens more than you think in this county. And where it goes through the wall in a townhome into their neighbor's yard. But the fact of it is, it doesn't solve the core problem of who fired the weapon. And until you know that, you really can't prosecute somebody. You can't prosecute me for a round that Supervisor Volpe fired. And this doesn't solve that. So I can't support it. Thank you. Sorry. Yes.
Okay. So first of all, thank everybody for coming and thank you for staying with us all evening. I have said many times, and I have no trouble saying that this is not a field that I was knowledgeable about or an expert in. And there are people in this room who I have called because I had questions. But what I have found is the more I study it, the more I go try to get knowledgeable, the more kind of appalled I get at some things, including what Mr. Bonin just said. You can't figure out who shot the weapon, so no one gets charged. And I've said more than once, the moment somebody is killed, I bet they'll figure out who shot that weapon. And the statement of and I've heard it a couple times here tonight, well, nothing's happened, so kind of it's no big deal. Well, that's easy to say because no one has somebody's been grazed, but no one's been killed. The moment somebody gets killed, even if it's just one time, it becomes a big deal. And we'll probably figure out who shot that weapon. There are a lot of things that as I've studied it more and more, and I have, listen, if I don't know something, I have no trouble saying I don't know it, and I will go study it. But studying it has put me less at ease than I thought I would be. Mr. Yed, I think there was a question asked here tonight that you may not have the answer to right now, but at some point if you can get back to me or anybody else with the answer of, we did actually say that some education should be done on a countywide basis. We talked about how to do that, putting things on the website, putting posters up in places, and we maybe haven't actually had a discussion on that.
I can
And
address
so, so that is maybe an answer that I would want to have. The idea that we won't, that, and I believe you guys are responsible gun owners. Responsible gun owners would have any issue with your rounds not going into somebody else's yard. I would think because you're responsible gun owners, you would support that. And the last thing is, it was said a couple of times that this board shouldn't continue to erode gun laws or shouldn't continue to pass gun laws. This board has passed nothing. This is the first thing that we're actually take a vote on that may or may not pass. This board at this moment, that nothing has passed. And so we're not continuing to do anything. And finally, one thing I did learn, and I think Mr. Buffington was right, and many of you that spoke last time was right. The Birmingham idea was a bad idea. It was a bad idea, and once I really went and researched that, I realized it was a bad idea and a really, really costly idea. And so I realized that probably shouldn't happen. But grounds leaving people's property, I don't think that should happen either. So I will be absolutely supportive, absolutely supporting this. Thank you. Hi, Mr. Higgins. How are you? Do you want to speak on the motion that you've not maybe heard? Do you want to hear the motion before you?
I'm familiar with the motion.
Okay, do you want to speak on the motion, Mr. Higgins? Go for it.
Thank you, Madam
Actually,
Chair.
Mr. Higgins, with all respect, the motion did change. You want to see it?
Couple words.
I didn't say it changed by much, I said it changed.
Looks pretty similar to the other one, but thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for getting here as late as I have, but at least I was able to get here. I heard some of the conversation and debate tonight on the way in, and certainly there's nobody at this dais that doesn't want to see firearms used in a safe manner and people's property rights protected, and in a responsible manner as well. Having said that, I don't see where this particular addition to the ordinances in Loudoun County solves that problem. It adds another layer of codified ordinance, but it still does not solve the problem that is essential to the issue, and that is who actually fired the round, wherever it went. And I believe that in the conversations that we had, both at our previous meetings on this and tonight, I don't know of anybody from law enforcement that has said, or from the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office that said that this is any more enforceable than the other reckless discharge of a firearm, because unless you know who fired the round and who pulled the trigger, you don't have the evidence to prosecute. So the problem doesn't change. And I, for one, absolutely do not support the use of firearms in a reckless manner where rounds strike somebody else's property. But at the same time, this isn't the solution to that problem. And one of the things that we started out in the beginning of the conversation on these issues was that we needed to have better firearms training and better firearms information available through the county and to the population of the county so that they would be knowledgeable on the safe use and safest uses of the firearm. So while I think this motion may make some people feel good, I don't see where it makes any difference in trying to solve the problem. And so I will not be supporting it. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I appreciate your passion and your voice. And I'm sorry that I couldn't be here sooner, but better late than never. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Yett, would you like to answer that question before we go to Mr. Myers' closing?
Yes, Madam Chair. When we reported back to the board on November 7th, we did note that the board had previously given direction on preparing public outreach and additional information to help as training resources and informational resources to the community. The Public Affairs and Communications staff has indicated that upon approval of the codified ordinances, the amendments where you end up tonight, they will be moving forward with detailed information regarding the specific ordinance changes, the importance of using firearms safely, identifying safety training opportunities, and where to locate safe shooting venues. In addition, at the same time, since 2018, the Sheriff's Office video regarding safe shooting has been getting a great deal of hits from the public, and that continues to be a good resource. But we would continue to move forward with the previously adopted public outreach plan upon approval of these amendments.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer, would you like to close, please?
Yes, first thing is I'm going to playfully remind Supervisor Bona to read his packet and ask Mr. Yudd what our current prohibition is from a occupied structure with an occupancy permit. Is it 50 yards or 100 yards?
100.
It's 100 yards. The prohibition is on from a road is 50 yards, I think, where you're getting confused. However, that prohibition is not mentioned in the packet. Second, I want to say that basically there's an argument that's saying this isn't prosecutable either. If nothing is prosecutable, if reckless discharge isn't prosecutable, if this new law, which has a much lower burden of proof, isn't prosecutable, and literally nothing is prosecutable, and we're shooting in a group, and literally there's no consequences for our actions when you're target shooting in a group, that's a problem. That's what leads to arguments to ban shooting in Western Loudoun, which, by the way, the Republican-controlled General Assembly gave localities the authority to do. We have the authority to expand it from 100 yards to 880 yards like it's proposed. So you know what? In my opinion, we better figure out how to prosecute these. We better figure out how to prosecute these. This is lowering the burden of proof, getting rid of reckless, so you don't have to prove recklessness, and also saying that people have to shoot in such a manner as to contain the bullet in their property. That means you don't necessarily have to tie the bullet directly to the shooter. You have to show that shooters were shooting in such a manner that would have led the bullet to have left the property. So that is different, and that's exactly why we've crafted this the way we have, is to try to give it another shot so it doesn't lead to further regulations. Because I'll tell you, as soon as someone gets shot again, or as soon as multiple people keep getting hit, and we see these instances all the time, even ones that aren't reported to the sheriff's office, there's going to be a lot bigger restrictions coming, especially with the makeup of the next board. So we better figure out how to prosecute this. And this is why we're trying to move forward with that. And the answer is, well, we should just do nothing. I'm telling you, that's just a ticking time bomb, especially with the by right development happening in Western Loudoun. It's just a ticking time bomb. And so finally, I want to finish on a more positive note. I wore this tie on purpose. It is a red tie, and obviously some folks are wearing red tonight, but it also, if you see, it has little inscriptions on it. It says 1776. So it's a show of compromise. I think tonight what we're doing is something that is both constitutional and supportive of gun safety. And I think that those two things can be merged together. I think it's exactly what this board is doing on a bipartisan basis, and I will support this motion.
Okay, the motion that was made by Supervisor Meyer and seconded by Supervisor Armstead. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion will pass 6-3 with Mr. Higgins, Ms. Volpe, and Mr. Bona voting against the motion. Thank you. Mr. Bona, we have to go back into closed